Welcome everyone to our webinar today. We are going to be talking about how to get localization and testing for medical devices done right. Presented to you by QualiTest in partnership with Net-Translators. We are recording this session, so anyone who was unable to attend, they can go back and view the recording on our website, www.qualitestgroup.com. So let's get started. A quick introduction, guys. I am Nosheen Syed, and I'm managing the Knowledge and Innovation Initiative for QualiTest US UK. My role is to manage the company's knowledge assets, provide innovations and solutions to our customers involving knowledge extraction, insertion, training of employee, research and development. I've been working with QualiTest for about 4 years now, and I've gradually moved up from a testing role to project management, leading delivery management, and now I'm into knowledge and innovation. I really enjoy working at QualiTest due to the continuous learning, challenging, and the ever you to give your best. And joining me today is David from Net-Translators. David?
Hi, yes, as Nosheen mentioned, my name is David Summer. I'm the Director of Strategic Operations at Net-Translators. My position here today is to help our customers achieve optimal results by acting as a bridge between operations and sales. I've been with Net-Translators for the past 13 years, where I've previously been a project manager, and I'm finally looking forward to the World Baseball Classic, which is due to start in March.
Wow, baseball, cool. Thanks, David. Okay. So our agenda for today's webinar will be, starting with a quick introduction of what we do, and then we will move on to talking about a few challenges that we face in software testing in this domain and the lessons that we have learned down the road. Then we'll be talking about certain solutions and tools, and then just sum it all up and answer all your questions that you might have. So just to reiterate, everybody is on mute, but please feel free to use the questions panel on your GoToWebinar panel, which is on the right side of your screen, and we will address all these questions at the end of the webinar. During the webinar, I will be focusing more on medical device software testing in general, while David will elaborate more on medical device localization and translation. Okay, so to quickly introduce ourselves, QualiTest is the world's second largest independent testing company, and we have been recognized for each of the past 3 years as the only visionary pure play QA and testing services company in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. A brief introduction and background about QualiTest in the medical domain. The medical and healthcare domain, as you all know, is a vast playground to offer testing services. There is radiology, imaging software, pharmaceuticals and their portals, healthcare, health insurance, hospital applications, ICD testing, localization, translation. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So at QualiTest, we offer all of these testing services that comply with FDA regulations and help us create a wide range of healthcare-based testing services and medical software verification and validation services, including all functional, automation, as well as performance. Some of our clients in this domain include Fujifilms, GE Healthcare, Philips, Calzaius, Think Surgical, and Accuray. They have attested to our services and have supported us in publishing case stories. For more information, of course, you can go and visit our website. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Nosheen. Just a brief overview of Net-Translators before we get started. We are a global MLV specializing in the technology sectors, with our main vertical being the medical device industry. An expression of our expertise is found in our multiple international quality certifications, which include, in addition to ISO 9001, also ISO 13485, which represents the requirements for a comprehensive quality management system for the design and manufacture of medical devices. ISO 17100, which provides requirements for the core processes, resources, and other aspects necessary for the delivery of a quality translation service that meets applicable specifications. And the new Canadian national standard that sets out the procedural requirements for delivering translation services that suppliers of translation services to the federal government of Canada have to adopt. We have offices in the U.S., Israel, and Argentina, and have a solution-oriented approach to providing our customers with the best solution for their language needs.
Good. Thanks, David. That was really impressive. So let's move on to our next item on the agenda, challenges. So all of us have faced certain challenges in the medical device, software testing, and localization domain. The first and the most important, or the most critical, I should say, challenge that we all face is the domain knowledge. Software engineers testing the medical software usually have zero to very little knowledge of the domain, be it radiology, whether it's ICD-10 codes, be it PACS system architecture or DICOM standards, and hence a lot of time is lost in education, ramp up of resources, training, and due to a lot of compliance issues, sharing of this knowledge also has its limitations. Another critical challenge is understanding the FDA rules, other regulations for countries, the ISO standards, keeping them in mind while we are designing test cases, trying to maintain high traceability towards these regulations and requirements, detailed documentation versus the time that is available is altogether a lot to handle. Then talking about sensitive client environment. Now what I mean by this is sensitive data in and out of the system. Compliance when it comes to patient information, clerical data, security constraints across systems, environment, and hence sometimes the need or the challenge to provide the right testing tools for every stage, be it design, development, or verification validation. Test data management. Now, managing test data is one of the biggest challenges in this industry or in this domain. Why? Because simulating this data is a ton of info, like there is patient information, CT, MRI details, images, standards, and the need for having a specific database for storing this data and using it for testing purposes is very challenging. Managing the interactions with the database, the compatibility across platforms, and to maintain the integrity across platforms is very challenging when it comes down to test data. And then when we are talking about compatibility testing, it is of course very challenging because medical devices are required to integrate into hospital networks, transfer data, and have crude access to records. And then when it comes down to localization, I personally don't think that localization testing is any different in the medical domain than in web applications. But due to all of these above challenges that we talked about, it just becomes even more challenging. I'm sure, David, you can elaborate more on this. So over to you.
All right, thanks. Really, to fully understand localization and translation in the medical device industry, we need to take a look at the various regulations which govern these requirements. The regulation that probably has the largest impact are probably those mandated by the EU, and this is simply due to the fact that these regulations cover more languages than any other. Device manufacturers that intend to place their products in the European market must carefully comply with all essential requirements in Annex 1 to Directive 93/42 on medical devices, as well as with the member states' own legislation. The directive provides that member states may require the accompanying information to a medical device to be in their national language or in another community language. All member states require that safety information be provided in their official language to ensure understanding by the final user. The penalties for non-compliance vary from the removal of the product from the market and, in some cases, to criminal proceedings. The overriding guidance is that anything which deals with safety of the device must be made available in the user's language. The directive's main objective is to harmonize national provisions regarding safety, health protection, and performance characteristics of medical devices, including the relevant certification and inspection procedures. The directive allows member states to require the information, which must be made available to the user and the patient, to be in their national language or languages or in another community language when the device reaches the final user, regardless of whether it is for professional or other use. Of course, each country may also have its own regulations vis-a-vis language requirements. For example, the UK medical devices regulations provide that devices placed on the market or put into service must comply with relevant requirements. The essential requirements specified with regard to information on the packaging and on any label are complied with only if such information is in English, whether or not it's also in another language, and whether or not the device is for professional use. However, instructions for use may be in another EU language, provided that there is a clear statement in English stating the language in which instructions are given. The Netherlands provides that the information which must be available to the patient must be in the Dutch language, meaning not necessarily the caregiver, and Sweden provides that all devices that fall under the scope of Swedish law must be labeled in Swedish. Note, this seems to include patient-facing and caregiver-facing devices. As for the Far East in Japan, medical devices are regulated under Japan's Pharmaceutical Affairs Law. To market a medical device in Japan, a manufacturer must obtain manufacturing product approval for high-risk devices, ensuring the safety and effectiveness of the product. All documents submitted for manufacturing approval, as well as safety documents, must be in Japanese. In China, devices undergo a registration process based on classification. Class 3 devices, for example, require testing by Chinese laboratory, and all safety information must be in Chinese for high-risk devices. Medical devices must provide instructions for use in Mandarin Chinese, translating when importing into China, and the translation must be done before the product is allowed to enter the country.
Wow. That's a long list of challenges. Wow. Good. Thanks, David. So let's move on. Let's talk about some lessons that we have learned. In other words, some people like to call it best practices. So some of our case studies and experience in this domain have, indicated certain lessons and best practices down the road. First, domain knowledge and training, very essential. Now, as we discussed, due to the several challenges, clients usually have very limited resources available to support knowledge transfer and training of software, hardware, and the clinical elements of the system. And often engagements require different roles in various technical and domain expertise, from functional testers to system engineers, and each role requires a different training plan. And hence, reinventing the wheel every time is an inefficient use of time and knowledge. So we learned that it's important to train the trainers, that is, invest in a training plan and a knowledge base that then transforms into a comprehensive training plan. Now, as I mentioned earlier, due to compliance, we cannot share the customer data or info. But what we can do is provide the basic tools like strong and detailed functional testing skills, background on FDA rules and regulations, education on terminology, list of best practices, and even criteria for tool selection. Your leads, your managers become your experts and your contributors. And when you start gathering these experiences from around your company, you will then see this knowledge flow into and out of this knowledge system, and then that is what facilitates quick learning and ramp up. Effective engagement models. So let me elaborate. When we were working with a client who is one of the largest international healthcare corporations, we were on very tight schedules with safety critical and real-time requirements. And that's when we learned that an MTS solution or a managed testing services where we assume the full responsibility for the project and we deliver results based on predefined SLAs, which is nothing but service level agreements, and these are measured on agreed upon KPIs. So this kind of a model really worked best for us and as well as for them. As we like to call it, leave it to the experts. Also, when we talk about engagement models, we learned that an onshore, on-site engagement works well. That is, having test engineers operate through a local test center that was located in close vicinity to the customer's premises, as well as on the customer's premises as per the customer's need, really enable better collaboration and also reduce the cost of the entire testing engagement. Test data, very critical and can save a lot of time and money if done the right way. Again, I would like to give an example. For one of our clients, Ministry Healthcare, they were updating and migrating their hospital network to ICD-10. Now, the ICD-10 is an international classification of diseases. It is a system which is used by physicians and other healthcare providers to classify and code all diagnoses, systems and procedures recorded in conjunction with hospital care in the US. So what we did was we came up with a simple and cost-effective solution, which was to create a golden data test set for testing. Now, it was nothing but just a set of dual-coded medical records, both ICD-9 and ICD-10. And this golden data test set was peer-reviewed and validated by clinical and coding experts. So not only this provided accurate revenue impacting testing, but also it was the least expensive approach for end-to-end testing with ICD-10 codes. Definitely this is something that we can keep in mind when we are planning for ICD-11, which is due by 2018, next year. So basically what I'm trying to convey is efficient planning of test data ahead of time helps build the infrastructure for testing. Understanding what type of data is needed for testing at the stage of test planning and not during execution. And then timely interaction with the database for injection and extraction of data sets with the help of internal tools to build upon them is very essential. Also, we need to keep in mind the reusability of this data. We want to make sure we are doing it efficiently and this data can be reused for a number of tests that we have planned for. Similarly, we learned that nativity and fluency in the language of engineers for localization testing can be really efficient. Hence, designing our software testing teams with at least one engineer who is native and fluent in, say, Russian, French, Hindi, or Turkish is very helpful, especially when it comes down to creating test data and edge scenarios. It can be as simple as the longest word that will test the cutoff in an input field. But having nativity and fluency in that language really gives you an upper hand. And last but not the least, the right selection of tools. The right selection of tools for every stage of testing is very important and critical. For example, once when we were working with one of our clients, they did not prefer having heavy installations on the client workstation. Hence, we had to research and recommend a lightweight automation tool where only a small agent needed to be installed and nothing heavy on the client side. Plus, this tool was able to recognize a lot of third-party UI components, which other tools were unable to. Plus, it worked with iPads and multiple other platforms. So basically what I'm trying to say is an image-based commercial automation tool was able to integrate with their test management system and Jira and did the trick rather than going for the obvious open source options. So we learned that the selection of the tools in this case is really important. David, over to you.
Thanks. So knowing the challenges that face medical device manufacturers vis-a-vis language requirements, and here again it's important to point out that the underlying reason for these requirements is to ensure patient safety and of course in business terms to reduce potential for loss due to liability, we need to see how we can meet those language needs of the customer. A good place to start would be to make sure that any vendor that you engage would be certified at the minimum to ISO 13485 as well as ISO 17100, the translation standard. I want to take a look at why this is the case. Often for customers, translation is a black box, and there is no real way to be certain that the quality is sufficient for their purpose. So like any other industry, the proper processes need to be ensured, and the way to achieve that is to look at the proper processes and make certain that your vendor follows these processes. There's no better reference than the ISO 17100 standard. This international standard specifies requirements for all aspects of the translation process directly affecting the quality and delivery of translation services. It includes provisions for translation service providers concerning the management of their core processes, minimum qualification requirements, the availability and management of resources, and other actions necessary for the delivery of a quality translation service. The standard is a comprehensive manual and addresses all the major aspects of quality. It begins by discussing the basic materials, which means the resources involved. The translators and reviewers should have translation competence, including linguistic and textual competence in the source and target languages, research competence, cultural competency, domain competence, obviously extremely important as far as medical devices are concerned, and of course technical competency, as the industry today is highly technical, and while there is no requirement that automated tools be used, the reality of the industry is that these tools are making the work much more efficient. The standard also sets forth translator qualifications, such as the requirement to possess a graduate degree. It further discusses requirements for project managers as well as technical and technological requirements. The standard takes an holistic approach to the subject of translation. This is due to the fact that so many factors can affect the final outcome, and in the pre-production phase includes determining the feasibility of the project. For example, is this a rush project, and if so, are the risks too great in order to accept it? Is there a sufficient budget on the part of the customer to carry out all the required steps? Do we have enough information about the specific study or project that we are localizing? Are there translation assets in place, such as glossaries and terminology databases? The standard also spells out very specifically the required processes. This process includes multiple controls such as translation, editing, proofreading checks, verifications, and quality control. And in fact, the standard also covers stages of activities that are post-production, such issues as ICR or in-country review feedback, implementation, archiving, and data management. Nosheen?
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, folks, let's talk about some solutions and tools. So regarding automation, let's talk about what to automate. But obvious, regression test, repetitive test. I think the less said here is better. Then certain tests related to memory leaks and consumption. Now, memory leaks tend to manifest over time. For example, a function can allocate a tiny amount of memory and fail to release it. But when it's run thousands of times, it can have a noticeable effect. So automating such kind of functions makes sense. Other examples can include applications that consume escalating amounts of CPU, disk, or table space as the data volume grows or as the number of users increases. So a scenario like this makes sense automating. Similarly, input fields testing. Manual testing of input fields can be very tedious. So manual testers can maybe test the boundary conditions, but automated tests can test for hundreds of variations overnight. So having talked about what we can automate when it comes down to medical device softwares, let's talk about how to automate. First most important thing is, of course, the automation tool selection. We talked about previously in selecting the right tool. But in addition, we would also like to recommend a few more capabilities to keep in mind. Revision control and document tracking. For revision or approval history of documents should be available in the automation tool. Revision control is usually built in with most of the tools today. So if your tool doesn't have that, then definitely you're on the wrong track. Analysis and reporting. Most of the tools today have dashboards that can be customized and are real-time. This is a very important feature when it comes down to maintaining visibility within your team as well as higher management. Learning curve for the tool and maintainability in the future. Now this is where experts like us come into picture. Now we already know the tools, we have researched these tools in the past, we have worked with these tools, experienced them. We can come in and set up your test environment, we can install these tools, we can create these scripts for you, and we can train your staff to run and maintain them in the future. Costs and ROI definitely is most obvious and a critical factor then. Multi-threading. Now, multi-threading is very efficient, especially when it comes down to comparison of running extra machines for parallel testing across platforms. So if your automation tool can go about multi-threading, it will save you a lot of time and effort. And of course, a cross-platform compatible tool is another criteria that I would like to just squeeze in. After we have a selection on the tool, what kind of frameworks are we looking at? Data-driven frameworks. Now, as we talked about input field testing previously, if our tests are driven by data, then it's very easy to test these input fields. Now, you can have thousands of demographic information stored in the database or an Excel sheet, and you can use that to create new records in your applications. While we talk about data-driven automation, it's very important at this point that we also stress upon extensive exploratory manual testing in certain areas of the coding system. And whichever framework or whichever tool we go for, I think it's very important that we always generate a pseudocode document for our test and script. Now, this is what I mean by a pseudocode test document. It is basically a brief description of your test case and a mapping of your functions to the pseudocode. It just makes it so much easier for your testing teams. Okay. Now, when we are talking about tools, we at QualiTest developed the VRE tool, which is the Virtual Radiology Environment. Now, what is this? It is a comprehensive testing solution which is aimed to test your PACS system for scalability and reliability, and it offers a very comprehensive solution for DICOM and HL7 traffic. Now, it is basically a simulation system that replicates the live environment. It provides all of the network patterns and data flow that would natively occur in a radiology domain. And it has a very user-friendly UI where you can very easily pass your data to the system. It is found that VRE effectively reduces time, personnel needs, and there's a substantial ROI without sacrificing accuracy and reproducibility. Some of our clients have been using VRE for automation testing, manual testing, workflow testing, and simulation as well. It has also been used for development purposes, example prototyping, reverse engineering, bug fixing, and in some cases we are using it for support and training. For example, assistance in problem analysis, application training, field service training on the network traffic. Unfortunately, guys, I won't be able to demo the tool today, but I thought a case study would help explain it better. So for one of our clients, which is a diversified technological company, which has primary divisions focused on areas of healthcare, consumer lifestyle, and lighting, they had an issue where the problem was in managing the memory for a client viewer. The client test needed data to be loaded into the vendor's PACS system using actual DICOM images of a given modality, size, and slice count. The main issues included updating and processing of the images, the coordination and running of the software across each file on the disk, and updating the header takes days to correctly update even 1 terabyte of DICOM images for multiple studies and patients, along with correctly edited HL7 for each. And the data sets had to be entered the PACS system using CStore and consolidated by the system with the required orders. So what we did was we proposed the VRE tool and performed a free of charge POC for them, demonstrating the benefits of using the VRE tool. And this tool was able to accomplish the issues of updating and processing images automatically by using a proprietary rules engine internally to update all of the header data without loading the full image data into memory. And this saved the system resources and time on the VRE server while realistically simulating a live radiology department. And after the data was converted into proprietary format, the issue was completely reproducible. So the real-world execution of the VRE system allowed this vendor to reproduce the issues in-house without any delays and provide a patch to the impacted customer faster than previously possible. So as you all can see, the key benefits were the VRE reduced the testing time by 33%, personnel needs were reduced by 90%, paperwork and coordination for executing such a task were greatly simplified, and of course a substantial ROI was achieved. Now, if you like to know more about this tool, I would recommend going on our website, QualiTestGroup.com. There are a lot of educational videos, free videos on this tool. So I would really recommend you guys to go in there and explore a little bit more about the tool. It is definitely a very useful tool. So moving on to you, David.
Oh, thanks. So having looked at the language requirements for medical devices and the ISO 17100 standard, I want to take a moment to translate, for lack of a better word, this into real-life application. Essentially, the strategy consists of 3 concentric rings, with the outermost ring dealing with the content layer. By this I mean the actual content for translation. Today, more than ever, we see a widening array of varied content that needs to be translated. It used to be that all that we would concern ourselves with was the UI and the accompanying documentation. Today, however, there are more and more types of material requiring translation, and the ability to interface with these various sources in an efficient manner via APIs, cloud-based management systems, platform-specific plugins, and so on, helps contribute to an effective localization strategy. The second circle is the basic outline of what happens to the content, and this includes the identification and extraction of the content, the preparation of the content, translation, and quality control, and finally the implementation of the translations into their proper place. The final circle is what happens inside at the vendor. Let's transition that. Yeah.
Okay.
So looking at our internal processes, you may note that much of what we do is what is laid out in the ISO 17100. The first stage, as we noted, is the analysis stage. This allows us to scope the project from a business standpoint and takes into account things such as DTP effort, testing effort, word count, leveraged word count, and terminology requirements. I will note that even prior to this stage, that insofar as software localization is concerned, that ensuring that your application supports localization is critical. One of the ways to test for this is to undertake a pseudo-localization, which applies a series of extended characters to the resource files and then may be visually checked to see if there are any issues which might arise. Beyond, of course, the character support, we also enable the expansion of the text as well as indicating start and finish lines, which will help identify whether or not there is enough room to account for the text expansion, or there are non-extracted strings, cosmetic issues, and so on. During the kickoff phase, the content is prepared and packaged for the linguists, and today much of this process is automated, which streamlines the projects. Also, here we check the project requirements and goals and update the glossary if necessary. The next phase is handled by the linguists and covers translation, editing, and proofreading, something that's commonly called TEP, and automated checks for consistency and adherence to glossary, as well as number integrity, which of course is crucial when speaking about medical devices. The post-translation tasks vary according to the type of content. It could be DTP, desktop publishing, or preparation of the content for implementation. And naturally, the QA/QC phase also depends upon the type of content. For instance, if it is web, then an in-context review would be necessary. If it is UI, then UI testing. If it is documentation, then final review of the layout in context. Finally, when this is completed, we deliver the content to the customer's in-country reviewer for their feedback. Next. Sorry. Okay, before I go into the tool set that we use and recommend, I do want to emphasize that for the most part, the success of a localization project hinges on implementing the correct process. I do want to take a moment to point out some key activities which will help ensure a quality localization that will resonate with your users. Ensuring that your content is localization ready entails a more disciplined approach to authoring and change management, terminology management, which would include glossary creation, and this glossary would include any proprietary as well as professional terms. We take a concept-based approach to terminology management, as a term can be more than a single word, but a concept. For example, emergency room. While emergency room are two words that are readily recognizable, the concept of an emergency room is different in different languages. This glossary would then be translated by the translator and then approved on behalf of the customer by their own resources. One of the keys is also to enable the translator to be trained up in order to understand the uniqueness of your product. Of course, we mentioned earlier the remainder of the process, so there's no need to go into that. Just to look a little bit at it. Okay, so while Net-Translators is for the most part tool agnostic, and for good reason, we do of course need and use a wide range of tools in our production as well as platforms. So we tend to use well-known tools with portability and compatibility with international industry standards such as TMX and TBX, that is Translation Memory Exchange and Term-Based Exchange. Our main tools are SDL Trados, Pasilo, and XTM Cloud. These tools are intended for a wide variety of content. Some specialize. For example, Pasilo is a visual localization tool. Our most exciting offerings today, NetProxy, our solution for website localization. The idea behind which is that we can localize your website with little to no effort on your part. This solution is intended to help speed to market, time to market, as well as for companies that have limited resources dedicated to internationalizing their website. NetCloud is our customer-facing portal solution, which enables online submission of translation projects as well as tracking and reporting. Finally, of course, we use industry standard tools for DTP since we need to localize whatever formats our customers give us.
Cool. Excellent, David. Thank you. Okay, so to sum it all up, guys, we now ask you to go back and introspect your testing teams. How are you keeping up with the domain knowledge? Are you using the right tools to replicate a live environment for testing? Are you automating your testing efficiently? How are you engaging with your testing teams? And how are you managing your risks or exposures? Something to definitely think about. And that brings us to the end of our webinar. And we are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I see give a couple more people a chance. I see an interesting question. The question is, hi, is there any extra point for the tester linguist detecting the typo in multi-threading? Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think she's referring to a typo that we had on our slides, I think. I must say you are a great tester. We want to hire you. But thank you so much. Feedback noted.
We put that in there to see if anyone would notice.
Yeah. That was, we were testing you. Okay, I see another interesting question. Hi, which automation tool would you lean towards for medical device software testing? Well, I can answer that, David. So guys, as I explained earlier, it all depends on your need and requirement. While I am a supporter of open source tools like Selenium, but sometimes due to certain criteria, going with a commercial product makes more sense and can be a more effective solution for the customer. Now, there are various different low-level automation tools, like Selenium, Cucumber, Appium, Xamarin, which are generally used for unit and integration testing. And they are code-heavy and sometimes require a steep learning curve. And they are rarely cross-platform. But they are really effective in creating complex test logic that can be tested in isolation from a lot of UI components in our softwares. Then there is another category of high-level automation tools like Test Complete, Perfecto, Renorex, Eggplant. There are so many more that are used for system and acceptance testing. Now these are lighter, realistic tools, more cross-platform, more friendly, but at the same time they are also susceptible to breaking due to UI changes. So I think it all just comes down to what is your need, what your product is going through, how you are designing your product, and then selecting the right automation tool really makes the most sense here. Okay.
Thanks. So there's another question here.
Mm-hmm.
Is ISO 13485 mandatory for the agency? No, it's not. It's a voluntary standard. The only reason an agency would go for it would be to work with medical device companies because sometimes it's a requirement for them, but it's not a requirement. There's no statutory requirement, as far as I know, for ISO 13485.
Okay. I see a couple more questions. We have been asked how QualiTest and Net-Translators work together, and if so, how do you manage the software lifecycle? So I think, at this point I would like to say that we have partnered up together, QualiTest and Net-Translators. And if you, observed throughout the webinar, QualiTest talked in general about medical testing, strategies, processes, and then when it comes down to a more focused testing group, that's where when we bring Net-Translators into picture, which is the case for localization testing and medical translation. So that's when we bring them in and have them, do the localization testing for us.
All right, good point. The cooperation between QualiTest and Net-Translators, and we've been doing this exploratory very for quite a long time. We found that the synergy between what we do and what QualiTest does just allows the customers to increase their quality of their own deliverables. It's not where one activity is done and then the other one picks up. There has to be a better synergy between the companies. This way there's a true savings on the part of the customers.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you can see, everyone, our email addresses are mentioned on this last slide. So if there are any more follow-up questions, we are happy to attend to them via email. So please feel free to reach out and we'll try our best to address all your queries. And as mentioned earlier, this session was recorded and the recording of the same will be available on our websites, both on QualiTest as well as Net-Translator's website for your viewing. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you joining the webinar. And thanks, David.
Thank you, Nosheen. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.